When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Hello, Patriotic Christian again. Today I am explaining natural law. Where does it come from? Now, these famous words I just read were written by Thomas Jefferson. And here's some of the things he wrote, just some highlights here. He wrote, to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. So he's talking about laws of nature, and he's also talking about a God of nature. He also mentions here that we hold these truths to be self-evident. And he again speaks of our Creator and that we're endowed with certain unalienable rights. What is he talking about? Now, some of you may think that Thomas Jefferson actually invented this idea, but that's not actually true. He didn't. He was familiar with the concept, and so were all the signers who signed off on this document, representing the people of the 13 colonies at the time. They were familiar with this idea of natural law, or the laws of nature. But where did it come from? Because it didn't actually start with them either. You can trace it back through different periods of time, and you'll see it discussed, and different people sometimes claim that it came from one source or another. But today I'm going to explain to you that the concept actually came from the Bible. So I'm going to read a few verses here. It can easily be found in Romans, which is where I'm going to focus on. So here in Romans chapter 1, verses 18 through 20, it says, "For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who hold the truth in unrighteousness. Because that which may be known of God is manifest in them, for God hath showed it unto them. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse." Now here Paul is explaining the concept of natural rights and demonstrating that because people have the ability to observe things in nature, the natural law, that people are without excuse, even if they don't have God's written law. They are without excuse. Even the heathen have it. Now also in Romans chapter 2, he mentions it again. This is verses 14 through 15. "For when the Gentiles, which have not the law, do by nature the things contained in the law, these having not the law are a law unto themselves, which show the work of the law written in their hearts, their conscience also bearing witness, and their thoughts the meanwhile accusing or else excusing one another." So that's the biblical basis for it. And I realize that you can trace it back even further than Paul's writings. Paul was actually, in some cases, referring to concepts that the pagans had observed and recognized were natural law. But again, this is stuff that God has put into nature that we can observe. And it's not unique to the Bible. Anyone can observe it. So what I have here is an illustration. Now I have here an illustration of what I believe are the three kinds of mechanisms that God has given us that we can know what is right and wrong. These are the way that God reveals his laws to us. So the first one here is natural law. This is something that any of us can observe in nature. Okay, we can observe in nature all kinds of things. For example, the right of self-defense can be very easily observed in nature. It's a very natural thing. Self-preservation is important for any species to survive. And whenever a predator comes to attack someone, that animal or person is perfectly justified in fighting back or running away or using whatever means is at their disposal to survive. And of course, also predators, in a way, they have this sort of natural law that they have to eat and so on. Now that, of course, brings up the slight problem with pure natural law, is that after sin, nature has become corrupted. So this is not a 100% reliable way of knowing what's right and wrong. It's not 100% law, because there are things in nature that have gone wrong. And so because of that, we can't rely on it 100%, but there is still a lot of stuff we can learn from nature. For example, the right to property. Every animal finds something, some place to call home, they claim it, they put their effort into it, and it's theirs. Unless someone or something comes along and forces them out, right? In which case, you have an example of the corrupted nature where, other creatures can come and displace others. That's part of the corrupted creation, but we're stuck with it. Now, God also gives us a conscience. Now, this is sort of like an internal mechanism that we all have that sort of tells us what's right and wrong. And we have this sort of ability to just know by intuition, so to speak. But again, this is also not 100% reliable, because our nature is corrupt. We could be influenced by a corrupted culture that doesn't have the right concepts of right and wrong, and if we get raised this way, we could have a skewed idea of right and wrong. And although our conscience may still work, it might have been corrupted enough that it doesn't work correctly. But again, you can combine both natural law, things you can observe in nature, and your conscience, and you'll have a pretty good sense of what's right and wrong. And this is what Paul was talking about in Romans 2, that the Gentiles who do by nature the things contained in the law, meaning God's law, that it's like a law unto themselves, right? Now this brings us to the third one. This is God's law. This is the law that God reveals to us through His Word. Now this law, unlike the other two, has not been corrupted. Sin has not corrupted this law. So this is clearly the most reliable source. But there are some things that it doesn't address, right? And because there are a few things in specific circumstances that aren't addressed, we can very easily, as long as we've got access to this, we'll know for sure on certain things, and then other things we can let our conscience and what we observe in nature sort of fill in the gaps. We can know what's right and what's wrong. Even if you don't have God's law telling you not to steal, you probably know it inside that it's wrong. Plus, every animal who goes out and gathers their own food is entitled to the food that they gathered. A stronger animal might come along and steal it, but we can just instantly tell that in the proper order of nature, that's wrong, right? The animal should go out and find their own food. A squirrel can collect nuts and save them up for the winter, and they don't have to share them with other squirrels that didn't collect enough nuts for themselves. That's just part of natural law. And we also know by nature that we shouldn't steal from people. So anyway, I hope this explains the basic concept of natural law that Thomas Jefferson referred to. And I hope that those who are a little bit confused about this can just start observing nature and find, you can reach lots of good conclusions by just observing what happens in nature. And also, don't forget your conscience, but most importantly, Read God's Word because He reveals a lot of things to us directly. And it's very important. They should always agree. Whenever you do find an apparent contradiction, go with this one. Go with God's law. But if you're interpreting things correctly, and understanding that our nature is corrupted, that certain things in nature can't be relied on, but if you're interpreting things correctly, all three of these should agree. Because God's Word tells you not to steal, your conscience should tell you not to steal, and if you observe in nature, you'll see that stealing is wrong. All of it agrees. So I hope that was helpful, and I will catch you on the next video.